Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today on the program Daytime Talk. My name is Emmanuel Ere. Now the global response and the scores of world leaders that gathered at the memorial service in honor of the late great Nelson Mandela, who passed on the 5th of December 2013 at the age of 95, arguably the greatest African leader ever lived, is a testimony of the fact that you can actually do it right and become an icon. Now, 3 lessons that you may want to draw from his life and times. One, if you are truly committed to a cause greater than self, even through persecution, with persistence and endurance, you will eventually become a hero. Number 2, leadership is great only through genuine service. And number 3, you do not need 2 terms to make an impact in the lives of the people. 1 term was enough for Nelson Mandela to set a record for the world to admire. Today, we are talking about the man Nelson Mandela, his life and his legacy. I have Tochukwu Ezukama, a public affairs analyst and author, with us today. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We also have Abubakar Yesufu, the chairman of the League of Patriotic Lawyers and a public affairs analyst. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, many people have talked about the greatness of the man Nelson Mandela. I want to start from what was your response to Chukwu Ezukama when you heard the news of his death?
Well, I was not really surprised about his death because he was quite an old man and he was in and out of the hospital. So to me, I guess I expected it. I knew his days were numbered. Very few individuals live up to 95. So I know he was closing up. So I wasn't surprised when I heard his death. But I kind of felt bad because it was one of the most remarkable phenomenon of the 20th century. So I was, it was a life to celebrate. So I felt, I guess I was, what's the word? It's not ambivalent. I wasn't ambivalent, but it was, I felt good and I felt bad. I don't really remember the word for it because this was a great man. We knew he was to die and he died, and it was mournful, sad, but then I felt it was a celebration. It was a life also to celebrate.
Abubakar Yusuf, how did you respond to the news of his death?
Well, I tend to agree with my good friend that, you know, as a human being, you know, you come and eventually you grow old and you pass on. So to that extent, you know, I was not too shocked. I was also shocked in the sense that it was a closure, you know, of an important page, not only in the history of Africa, but in the history of mankind, because Mandela was actually an icon. And it would be very difficult to replace such an icon. So I was surprised and I was not surprised, so to say. So we keep celebrating his good life, his deeds, patriotism, you know, and adherence to beliefs. So they are quite profound.
Okay, let's go back to a bit of his early life. Yeah. You know, not much was heard about him until he began to spearhead the youth wing of the ANC. So from there to Chukwu Ezukama, what did you see coming up from through his life?
Well, the thing is that, let me just say that when Mandela came out from prison, I read his speech, a newspaper reprint of his speech that he gave. And I was crying as I was reading that speech, and I was wondering why this effusion of tears over a newspaper reprint of his speech. But it occurred to me that that speech was faintly reminiscent of an earlier event. I'm not going to go into the earlier event, but what the earlier event was about, or what it brought to mind, was I was crying because I was shedding tears because of my imagination of what 28 years of imprisonment could have done to a man's life, as contrasted to the simplicity, the bitterlessness, you see, the desire for peace and accommodation that,
Even
that were
after
made
27
evident,
or
that were
28
made, that were made evident in his speech.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the program Daytime Talk. My name is Emmanuel Irei. I apologize for coming late. The reasons are known. We just saw the memorial service of the great icon, late Nelson Mandela. Now, the global response and the scores of world leaders gathered at that memorial service in honor of late Nelson Mandela, who died on the 5th of December 2013 at the age of 95, arguably the greatest African leader ever lived, is a testimony of the fact that you can actually do it right and become something to celebrate globally. Now, 3 lessons you may want to take out of his life. Number 1, if you are truly committed to a cause greater than self, even through persecution, with endurance and persistence, you will eventually become a hero. Number 2, leadership is great by virtue of genuine service. And number 3, you don't actually need 2 terms to make an impact in the lives of the people. So this political slogan of let good work continue doesn't really go down well in history if you put it side by side with what Mandela did in just 1 term. He made the world go around. Well, today we are talking about the man Nelson Mandela, his life, and his legacy. I have Tochukwu Ezukama, an author, a public affairs analyst. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We also have Barrister Wahab Shitu, of course, the Lagos-based lawyer. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Another lawyer, chairman of Patriotic League of Patriotic Lawyers, Abubakar Yesufu. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start from what was your response when you heard of the news of his death, Tochukwu Ezukama?
Well, I was saddened by his death in one way, but on the other hand, I was not. I kind of expected it. He was quite an old man. He was 95 years already, and he's been in and out of the hospital. So that was kind of expected. So I felt it was something to mourn, but then on the other hand, it was something to celebrate. So I was kind of ambivalent. I expected it. I knew it was time. It would come at some point, and he has been very sick. He was very sick for quite some time. So I was ambivalent, sad, but
you saw it coming.
I saw it coming, yes.
Wahab Shitu, how did you respond to the news of his death?
Well, I will shock you by saying I had a feeling of celebration for a fulfilling life, a life of great lessons for humanity. And I believe this is, well, ultimately as mortals, all of us must die at some point in time. I felt a sense of fulfillment for him because he has lived his life to the fullest. And it was time to go. And a lesson for all of us that at some point in time we must ultimately go. So what is important is not just the fact of death, because it's something that is inevitable in the life of every mortal. What is important is what will you be remembered for?
Okay, we'll go into
And
details of
I
that.
think his death is cause for a lot of celebration.
Abubakar, Yesufu,
Thank you so much.
what was your
Well,
response?
at the League of Patriotic Lawyers, we believe strongly both in the existential school of thought and fatalist school of thought. Fatalist school of thought in the sense that when a man dies, is fatal. Is a sad end to existence, so to say. Existentialist school of thought means that is existing, and when you exist to die. It's part of living. Death is part of living. So we're both saddened, and we were also both happy in the sense that as an icon, he left indelible marks. Too difficult, too almost irreplaceable, not only in Africa but in the universe. So it calls for celebration, and it's also a very sobering mood that such a man has passed on.
Okay. The global response it had, even in all spheres of life, in football, for those of us who kept watch with some of the Premiership matches and all that, it was awesome to see how the world responded to the death of an African leader, Tochukwu Ezukama.
Well, Mandela was undoubtedly one of the greatest phenomena of this century. So he touched lives in many directions because of what he did in South Africa. What he did in South Africa was unique in the sense that I called it a peaceful revolution. I don't think there had been a time when in history when power shifted from the oppressor to the oppressed peacefully. There was power shift in the U.S. from the whites to a considerable extent to the blacks. But the blacks were the minority. So the oppressing minority gave power to the oppressed majority. And it happened so peacefully. So that was dramatic. Those are things that happen after wars. But in South Africa, it was done so peacefully. And that impressed the whites, that impressed the blacks. You got the blacks' freedom. You got the whites' forgiveness. And you got the whole nation stability, peace, a multiracial democracy thriving in the south of Africa.
Okay. Yes, Barrister Wahab Shitu. Now, in terms of his life, you may want to go back to his early days. Not much was really heard about him until he became the youth leader, became a leader of the youth wing of the ANC. Not really much was, but it was as if it was a light coming up. Okay, so from there, what do you see? What would you tell us about his life and times?
Well, there are so many lessons packed into one single life, typified by Nelson Mandela. Several lessons, in fact, it's an embodiment of virtues. But for me, the greatest lesson of his life is that is a life of sacrifice. And that is symbolic. If you look at what Abraham Lincoln told his press secretary on the eve of his death, he said, and I quote, he said, the worthiness of life is deep-rooted in sacrifice to mankind. If one dies in the process, he becomes a martyr. So, Nelson Mandela is not a martyr because he led a life of sacrifice. Not just for himself. He was prepared. You recall that when he was sentenced to prison, to life imprisonment in 1964, he said, during my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination. and I fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I'm prepared to die. That is symbolic. Somebody who was prepared to give his life for a free and democratic society. It's like it's akin to the life of Jesus Christ, or the life of Prophet Muhammad, or other great prophets like that, who surrendered their life in order for the society to be a better place.
You know, I would like to take it from there.
Okay.
You know, Nelson Mandela didn't call himself a saint. In fact, he said, except you say a saint is a sinner who keeps trying, then I'm a saint. Like every human being, he seemed to have had his issues. Maybe you tell us about that, Abubakar.
Well, let me quickly just add to that. You know, he mentioned, Christ, mentioned something about sainthood and whatever you. I think Mandela was, would I say, a good Christian, so to say, good Christian, in quote. Because I would think he mastered thoroughly this, biblical paternoster.